Hey everyone, Two Angry Frogs and Atku here, and today we're going to take a look at Follower Dungeons. Follower Dungeons are a new feature in patch 10.2.5 that gives the player an option to solo normal level Dragonflight dungeons. They support 1 to 4 players, and it uses AI followers to fill out any missing roles that you have in the party. So why do we think this is a great content addition to the game? Well, it gives you an opportunity to experience dungeon content and WoW storylines that you may have been locked out from in the past. It gives you a way to practice a new class or spec, or maybe to practice tanking and healing in a dungeon group type setting. It gives you time to learn dungeon boss mechanics and how to move throughout the dungeons, and we'll talk to some of the in-game resources that are available later in the video. And I think the biggest positive is they can be run at your own pace without the anxiety that many players feel when think about running dungeons in a group of random people. So let's take a look at what you need to know to first get into this content. But before we begin, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you always know what we're up to next. And thank you to everyone for your support. Now, let's get into it. To start a follower dungeon, open the Dungeons and Raids window, and under the drop-down, you'll see a new category. Currently, all 8 Dragonflight dungeons are available on normal level. You can select 1 or more specific dungeons, or you can select all of them to be queued into a random dungeon. Follower dungeons work like all other group finder content, and once you click the Find Group button, you are put into a queue for the dungeons that you selected. Once you zone in, you'll see your AI followers. The followers fill in any roles that you are missing. So for example, we see Atku here as a hunter DPS. So the followers fill in the tank, healer, and other 2 DPS roles. Note that the followers are static, so you don't get to select who is in your party. We did find, however, that the followers do not duplicate the class you were playing. So instead of having a second hunter, as would be normal in our group, we had a shaman and a fire mage for the other 2 DPS roles. You're given the option of leading the group or following, and by default, you start the dungeon as the leader. This can be freely switched at any time while you're in the dungeon, and you can add this action button to your bars to easily switch it back and forth. Switching back and forth can be useful if, for example, you want to lead and there's a specific route through the dungeon that you want to take, but you want to switch to following when you get to the bosses to ensure that the tank pulls the boss. Selecting the following option is also great if you're unfamiliar with the dungeon and unfamiliar with how to go through the route in that dungeon. There are some in-game resources available to help you as you work your way through the dungeon. First, each time you enter a dungeon, you'll see that your AI followers mention check your adventure guide. When you open the adventure guide window, it automatically brings up the dungeon you're in. And if you click on a boss and select the abilities tab, you'll see the abilities of each boss and which ones to be aware of. The adventure guide points out key abilities using indicators, such as deadly and important. It also points out key tank and healer alerts. For example, the Savage Claw ability is a charge after 14 seconds that can prove deadly to DPS and healers. As a tank, you will want to use a defensive for this ability and make sure that you are the first person hit in order to absorb that ability. Second, the AI followers provide clues as to what to do, such as telling you to fire the lances for Granite in the no-coup defensive, or releasing Tuskar from cages in Bracklehide Hollow. Note that the player is still responsible for performing these tasks, so the AI is not going to do that for you, but if you watch the chat bubbles, you watch in your chat, you will see that they'll call out to do certain things. It's a good idea to keep an eye on your chat window. Make sure you're picking up on these clues that the AI followers are providing as you're going through the dungeon. It's important to be aware as well that there are things the in-game resources will not point out, such as abilities for mobs that you need to interrupt, or specific mobs that should be crowd controlled, and so on. So there were a few things that we discovered while running the initial follower dungeons that you should take note of as you enter into them. The AI followers, as we mentioned earlier, do not handle interrupts or crowd control outside of a couple of corner cases that we noticed. For example, we found when we were put to sleep by the Vexus boss trash, the AI followers let the spell timer run. But we were broken out of the Arcane Tender's erratic growth ability in Azure Vaults. These inconsistencies, in addition to requiring you as the player to still be aware of what mobs are important and which ones need some type of interrupt, stun, control, and so on, is unfortunate since it can still require players to step outside of the game and go to an outside website source or whatever it is to fully understand what is important in the game. If you're tanking, it's a good idea to lead the group. Although it is funny to see the fire mage wonder why you want her to lead and then just start throwing fireballs at mobs. It's probably not the best way to keep control of how many mobs are being pulled. It is recommended that as the tank, you may gain some familiarity within the dungeon as a DPS, and then try and go in and tank that so you understand the routes and what mobs are in there. Another thing is the route that the AI tank takes through the dungeon doesn't always match what route you're going to see a typical group of players take. We saw this particularly in Neltheris, as the AI tank took very long routes and didn't use any of the type of jump shortcuts like a typical player group would. So just understand that as you go through these dungeons, from a routing standpoint, it may be a little different than what you'll see a player group take. Finally, on a great note, we found that when we took our level 65 Shadow Priest in, he did gain experience in the Follower Dungeon. So this will be a great way to get some of that required experience when leveling after you enter Dragonflight, and we think provides a great incentive to get more players taking advantage of Follower Dungeon and providing more input back on them. So in summary, I think Follower Dungeons are a great addition to the game. It makes more content more accessible to more players. The AI is well developed. I expect that the AI will get better over time, and they'll continue to learn how players react and play as more players engage in the Follower Dungeon. It is also a great way to gain experience from that level 60 to 70 for your ults or your main character. It's a great way to provide players a path to learn and practice a new class, a new spec, or role in group type content. Let us know what you think of this new feature down below in the comments and anything you would like to see in future videos, and have a great day.